The deafening crack of a gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Redemption, Colorado, as Penelope James ducked behind a water trough, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. The year was 1876, and she had traveled over 1,000 miles to find the man who had broken her sister's heart, only to find herself in the middle of a shootout on her first day in town. "Keep your head down, miss," a gruff voice shouted from somewhere to her right. Penelope peeked over the edge of the trough to see a tall figure crouched behind a wagon, six-shooter drawn. His face was partially obscured by the wide brim of his Stetson, but she could make out a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. The gunfire ceased as suddenly as it had begun, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Penelope's ears rang as she straightened her skirts and tried to regain her composure. The stranger holstered his weapon and approached her with long, confident strides. "You all right, madam?" he asked, extending a hand to help her up. "I believe so," Penelope replied, accepting his assistance. As she rose to her feet, she took in his appearance tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of whiskey. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson." "Lucas Lawson," he answered, releasing her hand and adjusting his hat. "And you'd be wise to find shelter, miss." "James, Penelope James," she said, brushing dust from her traveling dress. "I've only just arrived on the afternoon stage." Lucas Lawson's expression darkened. "Welcome to Redemption." "Not usually this exciting, I promise." He glanced down the street where several men were helping an injured fellow into the doctor's office. That was the Carlisle boys settling a dispute with the sheriff, been brewing for months. "I see," Penelope said, though she didn't really. She'd never witnessed violence like this in Philadelphia. "Could you direct me to the Golden Nugget Hotel? I have a reservation." Lucas tipped his hat. "I'll do you one better, Miss James. I'll escort you there myself. These streets might not be done with excitement today." As they walked side by side down the main street, Penelope couldn't help but notice the curious glances thrown their way. Lucas nodded to several townspeople as they passed, clearly well known in the community. "You're new to the West," he observed. It wasn't a question. "Is it that obvious?" she asked, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Your boots are too clean, and you flinched at gunfire instead of hitting the dirt right away," he replied matter-of-factly. "What brings a proper Eastern lady to our humble town?" Penelope hesitated. She couldn't very well tell this stranger her true purpose, to confront the man who had promised to marry her sister Martha, only to abandon her after taking her innocence, leaving her with child and a ruined reputation. The man who, according to the postmaster in Philadelphia, had settled in Redemption after striking it rich in a silver mine. "Family business," she said vaguely. "I'm to meet someone here." Lucas raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. They arrived at the hotel, a two-story building that, while modest by Philadelphia standards, appeared to be one of the finer establishments in town. "Here we are, Miss James," Lucas said, removing his hat as they stepped into the lobby. "I hope your stay in Redemption is less eventful from here on out." "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Lawson," Penelope replied, extending her gloved hand. He took it briefly, nodded, and replaced his hat. "Good day." As he turned to leave, Penelope called after him, "Mr. Lawson, might I inquire where I could find information about the residents of this town? I'm looking for someone specific." Lucas paused, studying her with those penetrating amber eyes. "The saloon's your best bet for information. Or the general store. Mrs. Wilkins knows everyone's business. But be careful who you ask about. Some folks out here came west to leave their pasts behind." With those cryptic words, he departed, leaving Penelope to wonder if she'd just received a warning. After settling into her room and changing into a fresh dress, Penelope decided to begin her investigation at the general store. The bell above the door jingled as she entered the cozy establishment, lined with shelves of dry goods and sundries. "Good afternoon," called a cheerful woman from behind the counter. "Welcome to Wilkins General Store. I'm Edith Wilkins. You must be our new visitor from back east. News travels fast in Redemption." Penelope James, she introduced herself, approaching the counter. I'm impressed by your information network, Mrs. Wilkins, the plump shopkeeper laughed. When you're the only store in town, you hear everything. Plus, Lucas Lawson mentioned escorting a new lady to the hotel after that nasty business with the Carlyles. Said you handled yourself well for an Easterner. Penelope felt a flush creep up her neck. Mr. Lawson was very kind to assist me. Lucas is one of the good ones, Mrs. Wilkins nodded approvingly. Runs the Double L Ranch just outside town. Started with nothing 5 years ago, now has one of the most successful cattle operations in the county. Honest as the day is long that one, Penelope filed this information away. Actually, Mrs. Wilkins, I'm hoping you might help me locate someone, a Mr. Harold Blackstone, Mrs. Wilkins' friendly expression faltered slightly. Harry Blackstone. Well now, he's not hard to find. Owns the Silver Spur saloon down the street, made a fortune in mining and now fancies himself quite the businessman. This matched the description Martha had given her. Wealthy, charming, and utterly without conscience. Thank you, Penelope said. Is he well regarded in town? Mrs. Wilkins busied herself arranging jars on a shelf. He's generous with his money, I'll say that much, built the new schoolhouse. But she lowered her voice. He has a reputation with the ladies, not the marrying kind if you take my meaning. Penelope's grip tightened on her reticule. I understand perfectly. Thank you for the information. Be careful around Harry, Mrs. Wilkins cautioned as Penelope turned to leave. And if you need anything else, you come see me, you hear? Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning to sink toward the western mountains, painting the dusty street in golden hues. Penelope steeled herself and headed toward the Silver Spur saloon. She would not confront Blackstone directly, not yet. First, she needed to observe him, understand his routine, and determine the best approach. The batwing doors of the saloon swung easily under her hands. Inside, the dim interior smelled of tobacco, whiskey, and unwashed bodies. Several heads turned as she entered. A respectable woman in a saloon was clearly an unusual sight. The piano player faltered for a moment before continuing his jaunty tune. "Can I help you, miss?" asked the bartender, a bald man with an impressive mustache. "I'm looking for the proprietor," Penelope said, keeping her voice steady despite her discomfort. "That'd be Mr. Blackstone, but he ain't here at the moment," the bartender replied. "Expected back tomorrow from Denver, something I can help you with instead." Disappointment and relief warred within her. "No, thank you, I'll return tomorrow." As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with a broad chest. Looking up, she found herself face to face with Lucas Lawson once more. "Miss James," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't expect to find you here, Mr. Lawson," she acknowledged, feeling strangely caught out. "I was just making inquiries." His expression grew serious. "About Harry Blackstone, I heard." His voice was low enough that only she could hear. "Walk with me." Without waiting for her response, he placed a light hand at the small of her back and guided her out of the saloon. Once outside, he steered her toward a quieter side street. "Mr. Lawson, I hardly think. What business do you have with Harry Blackstone?" He interrupted, his tone harder than she'd heard it before. Penelope bristled. "That's my private concern, sir. Blackstone is dangerous," Lucas said bluntly, "especially to a woman alone." "I can handle myself," she insisted. Lucas studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "At least let me buy you dinner. The hotel dining room is decent, and you can tell me what's really brought you to redemption." Penelope hesitated. She had planned to dine alone with her thoughts, planning her approach for tomorrow. But there was something in Lucas Lawson's direct gaze that made her reconsider. Perhaps a local ally wouldn't be amiss. "Very well," she agreed, "but I make no promises about sharing my business." Over a surprisingly palatable meal of beef stew and fresh bread, Penelope found herself warming to the taciturn rancher. He spoke little of himself, but when prompted, shared stories of establishing his ranch and the challenges of cattle driving. His hands, she noticed, were calloused and strong, the hands of a man who worked alongside his men rather than merely directing them. "How did you come to ranching?" she asked, genuinely curious. A shadow passed over his features. "War ended, couldn't go home, headed west like many others." "You fought for the Union, Confederate," he admitted, watching her carefully. "But that's a lifetime ago now." Penelope nodded. The war had ended 11 years ago, but its wounds still ran deep throughout the country. Her own father had lost a leg at Gettysburg. "And you?" Lucas asked. "What's your story, Miss James from Philadelphia?" Penelope took a sip of water, considering how much to reveal. "I have a sister, Martha. She's unwell. I've come on her behalf to see Blackstone." His eyes narrowed. "Yes," she met his gaze unflinchingly. "He wronged her, severely." Lucas's jaw tightened. "He's wronged many. What do you hope to accomplish?" "Justice," she said simply. "Or at the very least, acknowledgement of his crimes." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Blackstone has money and influence. Men like that don't answer for their actions easily." "Nevertheless, I must try," Penelope insisted, "for Martha's sake and for her child's." Understanding dawned in Lucas's eyes. "I see." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Be careful, Miss James. Blackstone won't take kindly to having his past catch up with him." "I don't expect him to," she replied, "but I didn't travel all this way to turn back at the first sign of difficulty." A reluctant smile tugged at Lucas's lips. "You've got spine, I'll give you that." He reached for his hat. "I should be going, got an early start tomorrow." As they parted at the hotel entrance, Lucas hesitated. "I'll be in town tomorrow, if you'd like. I could be nearby when you speak with Blackstone." The offer touched her. "That's kind, but unnecessary. This is my burden to bear," he nodded, respecting her decision. "Good night, Miss James." "Good night, Mr. Lawson." Morning brought clear skies and a renewed determination. Penelope dressed carefully in her most respectable traveling suit, a deep navy that conveyed seriousness without being severe. She tucked Martha's photograph into her pocket as a reminder of her purpose. The Silver Spur Saloon was quieter in the daylight hours, with only a few patrons nursing drinks at scattered tables. The same bartender recognized her immediately. "Mr. Blackstone returned from Denver this morning," he informed her. "He's in his office upstairs. Your name, miss?" "Penelope James. Please tell him it concerns a mutual acquaintance from Philadelphia." The bartender disappeared up a narrow staircase and returned moments later. "He'll see you. First door on the right." The office was opulently furnished compared to the rustic saloon below. A large mahogany desk dominated the space, flanked by bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. Behind the desk sat a handsome man in his 40s, expensively dressed with brilliantined hair and a neatly trimmed mustache. "Miss James," he greeted her with a charming smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What brings a Philadelphia lady to my humble establishment, Mr. Blackstone?" Penelope acknowledged coolly. "I believe you're acquainted with my sister, Martha James." The change in his expression was subtle but unmistakable, a slight tightening around the eyes, a momentary freeze of his smile before it resumed, broader than before. "Martha, of course. Lovely girl. How is she these days? Recovering?" Penelope replied, her voice hard. "From the devastation you left in your wake." Blackstone's smile vanished. "I'm afraid I don't take your meaning, Miss James." "Don't you?" Penelope withdrew Martha's photograph and placed it on the desk. "My sister, who believed your promises of marriage. Who now has a 2-year-old son with your eyes and no husband to provide for them." Blackstone glanced at the photograph, his expression carefully neutral. "A regrettable situation, to be sure. But I made no promises that weren't contingent on my return to Philadelphia, a return that business matters have, unfortunately, prevented." "How convenient for you," Penelope said coldly. "And how devastatingly inconvenient for my sister, whose reputation lies in tatters." Blackstone leaned back in his chair. "What exactly do you want, Miss James?" "Money. I'd be willing to provide a reasonable sum for the child's care as a gesture of goodwill." "I want you to face the consequences of your actions," Penelope replied. To acknowledge your son and provide him with your name. Blackstone laughed. My dear lady, I've built a life here. I have standing in this community. You can't possibly expect me to jeopardize that based on the claims of a woman I barely remember. Penelope's hands shook with rage. I have letters, Mr. Blackstone, letters in which you declare your undying love and promise to return for her. His expression hardened. Produce them then, though I doubt they'll hold much weight against my word in this town. The standoff was interrupted by a knock at the door. The bartender poked his head in. Boss, there's a situation downstairs needs your attention. Blackstone rose smoothly. We'll have to continue this discussion another time, Miss James. Feel free to show yourself out. With that, he brushed past her and departed. Penelope stood alone in the office, seething with frustration. He was right in this town, her word against his would amount to nothing. She needed more than letters, she needed irrefutable proof of his character. As she descended the stairs, she was surprised to find Lucas Lawson leaning against the bar, nursing a cup of coffee. He straightened when he saw her, concern evident in his expression. That bad, huh? He asked quietly. Worse, she admitted. He doesn't deny knowing her but claims no responsibility. Says his word against ours will stand in this town. Lucas's mouth tightened. He's probably right about that. Come on, let's get some air. They walked in silence down the main street, past the general store and the blacksmith shop, until they reached the edge of town where a small creek babbled peacefully. What will you do now? Lucas asked, skipping a stone across the water. Penelope sighed. I don't know. I can't return to Philadelphia empty-handed. Martha has suffered enough humiliation. Lucas was quiet for a moment. There might be others, he said finally. Other women Blackstone has wronged, if you could find them. A pattern of behavior, Penelope nodded slowly. That could sway public opinion against him. It's a start, Lucas agreed. Though not without risk, Blackstone won't take kindly to having his reputation threatened. I'm not afraid of him, Penelope declared, though in truth she felt a flutter of apprehension. Lucas studied her face. No, I don't suppose you are, but be careful all the same. He hesitated, then added, I have business at my ranch for the next few days, but I'll be back in town on Saturday. Will you still be here? Yes, Penelope confirmed. I've taken a room for 2 weeks. Good. He tipped his hat. Until Saturday, then. Over the next few days, Penelope embarked on a discreet investigation. She began with Mrs. Wilkins at the general store, who reluctantly shared rumors about a young widow named Clara who had worked briefly at the Silver Spur before disappearing abruptly last year. Some said she went home to her family in Kansas, Mrs. Wilkins confided in a hushed tone. Others said Blackstone paid for her to take care of a delicate condition, if you understand my meaning. From there, Penelope visited the local dressmaker, who provided another name, Sophia Miller, a schoolteacher who had left town under mysterious circumstances after being seen frequently in Blackstone's company. By Friday, Penelope had compiled a list of 5 women who had allegedly suffered from Blackstone's attention. None remained in redemption, making it difficult to corroborate the stories. Still, the pattern was clear and disturbingly similar to Martha's experience. That evening, as she returned to the hotel after dinner, the desk clerk handed her a note. Delivered for you this afternoon, Miss James. The paper was expensive, the handwriting elegant. Miss James, I've reconsidered our conversation. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement that satisfies us both. Please call at my residence tomorrow at noon. H. Blackstone. Penelope's pulse quickened. Had he decided to acknowledge his responsibilities, or was this a trap? She retired to her room troubled, wishing Lucas was in town to advise her. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Penelope dressed with care, choosing a practical walking dress in forest green. She tucked Martha's letters into her reticule, evidence of Blackstone's false promises. As an afterthought, she slipped a small Derringer pistol into her pocket, a parting gift from her father who had worried about her traveling alone. Blackstone's residence proved to be an impressive 2-story house at the north end of town, set back from the street and surrounded by a well-tended garden. A maid answered her knock and led her to a sunlit parlor. "Mr. Blackstone will be with you shortly," the maid said, leaving Penelope alone. She wandered the room, noting the expensive furnishings all clearly imported from back east. On the mantelpiece stood several framed photographs, including one of Blackstone shaking hands with what appeared to be a state official. "Admiring my humble abode." Blackstone's voice came from the doorway. Penelope turned, maintaining her composure. "You've done well for yourself, Mr. Blackstone. Indeed I have." He gestured to a pair of armchairs. "Please sit. Can I offer you refreshment? Tea, perhaps?" "No, thank you. I'd prefer to discuss the matter at hand." Blackstone settled into one of the chairs with a sigh. "Very well, I've been thinking about your situation, about Martha." He paused, expression softening. "I did care for her, you know, in my way." "Your way left her heartbroken and ruined," Penelope replied coldly. "Yes, well, I'm prepared to offer financial support. A monthly stipend for the boy's education and care, $500 to start and $50 monthly thereafter." The sum was substantial, more than Penelope had expected. "And acknowledgement? Will you give your son your name?" Blackstone's expression hardened. "That's not possible. I have position here, connections, a future. Surely you understand." "What I understand," Penelope said evenly, "is that you've left a trail of broken hearts and ruined lives across multiple states. My sister isn't the first woman you've abandoned." His eyes narrowed. "You've been asking questions around town." "I have." "Dangerous pastime," he remarked, his tone casual but his eyes cold. "People might get the wrong idea about a woman so interested in scandal." The threat was thinly veiled. Penelope stood her ground. "I'm not interested in scandal, Mr. Blackstone. I'm interested in justice." He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Justice? There's no justice out here, Miss James. There's only power and those who wield it." He rose, towering over her. "I'm offering you a generous settlement. Take it and return to Philadelphia. Tell your sister whatever pretty lies will comfort her." "And if I refuse?" Penelope asked, standing as well, refusing to be intimidated. "Then I'm afraid you'll find redemption suddenly very unwelcoming." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "Accidents happen in frontier towns, tragic ones sometimes." Penelope's hand slipped into her pocket, fingers closing around the derringer. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Blackstone?" "Warning you," he corrected with a cold smile. "As one does for a visitor unfamiliar with local dangers." Their standoff was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Moments later, the maid appeared. "Mr. Blackstone, Mr. Lawson is here to see you." Relief flooded Penelope at the sound of Lucas's name. Blackstone frowned, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "Tell him I'm occupied." "Too late for that," came Lucas's voice as he appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. His eyes quickly assessed the situation, lingering on Penelope's face. "Everything all right here, Miss James?" "Mr. Lawson," she acknowledged, grateful for his presence. "Mr. Blackstone and I were just concluding our business." Lucas stepped into the room, his posture relaxed but watchful. "Good timing, then. I need to speak with Harry about a cattle matter." Blackstone's jaw tightened. "This is highly irregular, Lawson." "So's threatening a lady," Lucas replied mildly, though his eyes were hard. "Which I couldn't help overhearing as I was shown in." Tension crackled between the men. Penelope seized the moment to move toward the door. "I'll consider your offer, Mr. Blackstone, inadequate though it is." "Good day, gentlemen." Lucas nodded to her. "I'll call on you later, Miss James, if that's agreeable." "It is," she confirmed, and departed with as much dignity as she could muster, though her knees felt weak with relief once she reached the street. True to his word, Lucas appeared at the hotel that afternoon. They sat in a quiet corner of the lobby, away from curious ears. "He threatened you," Lucas said without preamble. "Not explicitly," Penelope qualified, but his meaning was clear enough. Lucas's expression was grim. "Blackstone's dangerous when cornered. You should return to Philadelphia, Miss James. Take the money he offered." "And let him continue his predatory behavior," she demanded. "What about the next young woman he targets?" "That's not your burden to bear, isn't it?" Penelope shook her head. If I walk away, I'm complicit in whatever harm he causes in the future. Lucas studied her for a long moment. You're remarkably stubborn, so I've been told, she replied with a small smile, his expression softened. I admire your principles, Miss James, I truly do. But Blackstone has influence with the sheriff, the mayor, even the territorial judge. Penelope leaned forward. Then we need leverage, something that would make those men turn against him. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Yes, she confirmed, unless you're withdrawing your assistance. A slow smile spread across his face. No, madam, I'm in this now. He lowered his voice, and I might have an idea about that leverage. Over the next few days, Lucas and Penelope worked together, pursuing Lucas's hunch that Blackstone's mining fortune might not have been acquired entirely honestly. They discovered that the Silver Strike mine had originally belonged to a prospector named Jenkins, who had supposedly sold his claim to Blackstone for a pittance before disappearing. Jenkins was found dead 6 months later in Denver, Lucas explained as they pored over old newspapers in the town's small library. Officially ruled suicide, but there were rumors. Through careful questioning and research, they pieced together evidence suggesting Blackstone had forged the deed transfer after orchestrating Jenkins's disappearance. It wasn't conclusive proof, but it was enough to warrant investigation by territorial authorities. As they worked together, Penelope found herself increasingly drawn to Lucas. Unlike the polished, duplicitous Blackstone, Lucas was straightforward and honest. His quiet strength and unwavering moral compass reminded her of her father before the war had broken his spirit. One evening, as they walked back to her hotel after a long day of investigation, Lucas surprised her by asking, "What will you do when this is over, Miss James?" "Return to Philadelphia immediately," the question caught her off guard. She hadn't thought beyond achieving justice for Martha. "I suppose so. My sister needs me." Lucas nodded, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. "Of course, and you?" she asked. "Will you continue ranching? It's a good life," he said simply. Hard but honest. Something in his tone made her heart flutter strangely. They had reached the hotel and he tipped his hat in farewell. As he turned to leave, Penelope found herself calling after him. "Mr. Lawson, would you? That is, might I see your ranch before I depart? I've never seen a real Western cattle operation." His face lit up with a genuine smile that transformed his features. "I'd be honored to show you the Double L, Miss James. Day after tomorrow, I'll bring a buggy." "That would be lovely," she agreed, suddenly shy. The next day brought a breakthrough in their investigation. Lucas discovered an old miner who had worked Jenkins's claim and was willing to testify that Jenkins had never intended to sell. Armed with this information and the documentation they'd gathered, they approached the territorial marshal who happened to be passing through town. Marshal Brooks was a no-nonsense man with a weathered face and sharp eyes. He listened to their evidence without comment, then nodded gravely. "Serious accusations," he observed, "but there's enough here to warrant a formal investigation." He fixed them both with a stern look. "Blackstone won't take this lying down. He'll know who brought this forward." "We understand the risk," Lucas said firmly, his hand finding Penelope's briefly. "I'll need statements from both of you," the marshal continued, "and you'll likely be called to testify if this goes to trial." They provided their statements, and the marshal departed to confront Blackstone with a warrant to examine his business records. That evening, the news spread through town like wildfire. Harold Blackstone had been arrested on suspicion of fraud, forgery, and possible involvement in Jenkins's death. Penelope expected to feel triumphant. Instead, she felt strangely hollow. Justice was being served, but it didn't change Martha's circumstances. Her sister still faced life as an unmarried mother, her reputation in tatters. The next morning, Lucas arrived at the hotel with a buggy as promised. The early summer day was perfect for a drive, with clear blue skies and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of sage and wildflowers. "You're quiet today," Lucas observed as they left town behind, the landscape opening up into rolling grasslands. I was thinking about Martha, Penelope admitted. While I'm glad Blackstone will face justice for his crimes, it doesn't restore what my sister has lost. Lucas was silent for a moment. No, it doesn't, he agreed quietly. But perhaps it gives her son a chance to grow up in a world with one less predator. And perhaps it gives other women a chance to avoid your sister's fate. His perspective helped. You're right, it's not perfect justice, but it's something. They crested a hill and Lucas drew the horses to a halt. There it is, the double L. Below them spread a picturesque valley. A sturdy ranch house of hewn logs stood near a clear stream, surrounded by corrals, a barn, and several outbuildings. In the distance, cattle grazed on lush grassland that stretched to the mountains. It's beautiful, Penelope breathed, genuinely impressed. Pride was evident in Lucas's voice. Started with 20 head of cattle in this plot of land. Now I run over 500 head and employ 8 hands. You've built something remarkable, she said, meaning it. He turned to her, eyes serious. I'd like to show you something, if you don't mind a short detour before we reach the house. Of course. He guided the buggy toward a stand of cottonwoods near the stream. As they approached, Penelope saw a small cemetery enclosed by a white picket fence. Lucas helped her down from the buggy and led her through the gate. 3 graves occupied the tiny cemetery. 2 were marked with simple wooden crosses, weathered by time. The third had a proper headstone of polished granite. My parents, Lucas explained, gesturing to the crosses. They died of fever my first year here. The other is my wife, Laura. Penelope's heart constricted. I didn't know you were married, he corrected gently. She died in childbirth 4 years ago, her and our son both. I'm so sorry, Penelope whispered, understanding now the shadows she sometimes glimpsed in his eyes. Lucas stared at the headstone. After they died, I threw myself into building the ranch, didn't allow myself to think about anything else. He glanced at her. Until you arrived in town and stirred everything up. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she remained silent, waiting. I found myself thinking that Laura would have liked you, he continued. She had the same fire, the same unwillingness to accept injustice. She sounds remarkable, Penelope said softly. She was. Lucas squared his shoulders. I wanted you to know about her, about them, before I ask what comes next. Penelope's pulse quickened. Next, Lucas turned to face her fully. Your sister in Philadelphia, her situation. Could it be improved if she had family out west? Property, stability? Penelope blinked, trying to follow his meaning. I suppose, but I'm asking poorly, Lucas interrupted, looking frustrated with himself. What I mean to say is, I've grown to care for you, Miss James, deeply. I know we've known each other only a short while, but sometimes out here, life moves differently than back east, Mr. Lawson. Penelope began, her heart racing. Lucas, he corrected. Please? Lucas, she amended, the name feeling right on her lips. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that perhaps there's a place here for you, for your sister and her son too, if she wishes it. His eyes held hers, open and vulnerable. I'm suggesting that I'd like the chance to court you properly, Penelope, to see if what I feel might be returned. Joy bubbled up within her, unexpected but undeniable. In the short time she'd known him, Lucas Lawson had shown himself to be everything Harold Blackstone was not: honest, principled, and genuinely kind. I think, she said carefully, that I would like that very much. His face broke into a smile that transformed him, erasing years of solitude and grief. They stood there in the peaceful cemetery, the beginning of something new taking root, amid reminders of what had been lost. The next day, as they sat together on the ranch house porch, a rider approached from town. It was one of Lucas's hands, returning with mail and supplies. Among the letters was one addressed to Lucas that made him frown as he read it. Something wrong? Penelope asked, noting his expression. No, just unexpected. He hesitated, then handed her the letter. It's from my sister in Virginia. She writes every few months. Penelope took the crumpled paper, noting the feminine handwriting. You never mentioned a sister. "Lillian," he explained, "we weren't close after the war." "She married a Union officer." He looked away. "She wrote once after Laura died. I never replied, didn't see the point, understanding dawned, and she wrote again anyway." "She wrote once," Lucas confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. "That was enough to show she still cared, even when I pushed her away." He met Penelope's eyes. "Maybe it's time I wrote back." Penelope reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "I think that would be a fine idea." Later that afternoon, as Lucas showed her around the ranch, Penelope composed a letter in her mind to Martha. She would tell her sister about Blackstone's arrest and the justice being served. She would describe the wide, open spaces of Colorado territory, the clean air and sense of possibility. And she would tell her about Lucas Lawson, the honorable cowboy who had helped her find not just justice, but perhaps a new beginning for all of them. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in hues of gold and pink, Lucas drew her close. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise of what might be. "Stay," he whispered against her hair. "Not just for now, for always." Penelope thought of Philadelphia, of the life she'd known. Then she looked out at the vast landscape before them, at the home Lucas had built through determination and hard work. "Yes," she answered simply, "I will." And in that moment, on the porch of a ranch house in the wild territory of Colorado, Penelope James knew she had found not just justice for her sister, but a future for herself that she had never imagined possible. A future with a man who understood both loss and hope, and who was brave enough to reach for love once more.